Okay, so now it's recording. So Tara, one more time, thank you so much for accepting this invitation to talk to us. So my name is Romário Loffredo, okay? I'm a PhD student in tourism here in the University of São Paulo. And besides mobilities and tourism, I also study about vegan tourism and the relations between tourism and the climate changing. That's something that I'm starting now, but that's like a topic I'm going to dive into, okay? And this is my friend.
Hi, I'm Natalia. I'm an undergrad student in leisure and tourism in the University of São Paulo. And we are from MobTur.
Yeah, so MobTur is the group from our professor Tiago Alice, and that's our group to study about tourism and mobility. So that's how I met Natalia. Okay. And
Great.
Can you introduce yourself to us, Tara?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to talk to you, and hopefully I have something useful to say. So my name is Tara Duncan, and my current role is as a professor of tourism studies in Dalarna University in Sweden, which is about 3.5 hours north of Stockholm.
Okay, and Tara, how did you decide to become a teacher?
At university?
Yeah.
Okay, so a bit of a long, convoluted story. So I did my undergraduate degree at a university in Wales in the UK called at the time it was called St. David's University College. And I did my undergraduate degree in geography. And I had some really great teachers who really inspired me. But at the time, I didn't want to go straight into higher education. But I always thought, oh, it'd be quite nice to end up as teaching at university level. So I took a few years out, actually 7 years out. And then I came back and did my master's and my PhD. And did a bit of a meandering path into a academic job, and actually my first full-time academic job was at the University of Otago in New Zealand, and I was employed as a lecturer in tourism. And there I discovered that the job just wasn't teaching; it was also doing research and some other stuff as well.
Okay, perfect. And then okay. And how did you decide to study like tourism through the lens of mobilities?
That goes back really to my PhD research. Before I came back to studying, I was living and working in a ski resort in Canada, a ski resort called Whistler Blackcomb, which is about 120 kilometers north of Vancouver in British Columbia. And whilst I was there, I was really interested in why all these young people from all around the world, or all around Commonwealth countries generally, were coming and working for a season in this resort. So it's a resort that attracts about 2 million skier visits every year. Just the Whistler Blackcomb Mountain employs about 3,000 staff and 1,000 volunteers. And a lot of the young people were coming on working holiday visas. So they'd come and work for 3 or 4 months and then go off and do something else. And I was really intrigued by why they did this. And so that's one of the reasons I went back to university. And that's where I really started looking at the ideas of identity, space, and place, but how that combined with mobility and with work. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, right? So we chose to talk about your text, Lifestyle Mobilities, the Crossroads of Travel, Leisure, and Migration, that you wrote with Scott Coyne and Maria Thulemark. I hope that's how
Correct,
you say it.
Yep.
That was published in the journal Mobilities in 2013, right?
2015, 13, somewhere in there, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
A long time ago now, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's a real, I felt like it's a real, actual, like current text to talk about. So our first question about it is like, in the introduction of this text, you talk about John Urry's vision of how being on the move is a new way of life. So we would like to know if you still agree with that. How do you see that sentence nowadays? Do you believe that being on the move is really a lifestyle?
I think that being on the move remains more true now than it was even a decade ago, although it is much more problematic and complex, perhaps. Is it lifestyle? I think that's where the complexity comes in. There are definitely groups of people who are moving for lifestyle, but I think what we're seeing in the globe today is that there are many people moving for multiple reasons, and lifestyle may or may not be one of them. And I'm thinking refugees and asylum seekers, economic migrants, human trafficking. You know, people are moving for all sorts of reasons, sometimes voluntary, often not voluntary. And so lifestyle mobilities has become much more complex, and our understanding of why and how people move needs to become much more complex.
Okay.
Yeah. What would be your thoughts on how to provide mobility through decent work and other sustainable systems in development countries? How would you reduce the privilege barriers?
That's a really good question, and a really difficult one. And I've been trying to think about it, and I'm not sure that I've got an answer, or there is an answer. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about, and you sort of suggested, was sort of the sustainable systems and things like decent work. And you know, if we think through, for instance, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, then those should help give us the tools to make mobility more equal and to break down some of those barriers. However, what we saw during COVID especially is that the UN's SDGs were sort of thrown aside while we just tried to figure out how to survive a couple of years. And then since we've come or recovered from COVID, we can see that many of the SDGs are now just catching up. So as an example, gender equality, for instance, COVID put gender equality back by about 30 years. Now, that's not in every single aspect, but it has put it back. And so I think that has not helped how we can perceive mobilities and how we can make it more equitable and fair. At the same time, what COVID showed us is that the world is equal. You know, a virus makes us all the same. We're all equally have an equal chance of being affected by it. So I think in some ways it helped show us that we can achieve some sort of equity, but how we actually do it, I'm not sure. I think some of the changes have to do with how we think about mobility, and that it's recognizing that there is a disparity, and so going, okay, so how do we change this? So for instance, even just talking about tourism, one of the things we often say about tourism is, oh, you know, it's we need to get quality tourists. But that immediately excludes a lot of people. So then we go, well, is tourism a human right, or is it still an extra? And if we say it's closer to a human right, then how do we make it socially equal so that everyone has some sort of access? So I think there's lots of debates to be had, but I'm not sure that I can come up with any concrete answers. I'm sorry.
That's more than fine.
Yeah, that's valid.
I have a specific question by what you were talking about now. When we were like in that whole COVID situation, what was your opinion about the new tomorrow? Did you think that things were going to change, or did you have this thought that it's going to be all the same after it?
Do you know, at the beginning of COVID, and from a total academic perspective, you know, Tourism Geographies did a special issue on COVID, and there were a good number of authors who were sort of being very hopeful and optimistic, going, oh, this is such a chance for us to become sustainable, and, you know, look at all these things we can do. My problem always was with that is that they were writing about these things, but I'm like, how do we action those on the ground? You know, it was great saying it, but how do we actually do it? And it was a great moment to pause. But for a lot of people, that pause was just going, oh my God, what's just happened? And so I think unfortunately, I was a little bit cynical all the way through, and I was expecting a little bit more of what happened, in that, you know, post-COVID, what you saw is certainly in certain places around the world, people going, I haven't been anywhere for 2 years. I need to go on holiday. If it's just me, it doesn't matter. not realizing that everyone around them was doing exactly the same thing. And that we've seen an almost, the recovery is, we're almost back to 2019 levels globally. And some places like the Middle East have actually, increased more than 2019. So I think, unfortunately, I don't think it was the reset that it could have been. I don't think a lot of industries took enough advantage of it. But some of that has to do with government restrictions, money flows, people flows. There were lots of things that did limit our ability to make substantial, sustainable changes.
Yeah, I'm reading a lot right now about climate change alternatives, and I see how much stuff could have changed like during that time. So it's something a little like intriguing. It really caught my attention.
Yeah, and we can talk about, I think we could talk about that forever, because it's, things about like, how do we reduce flying? And it's always like, well, let's take the train instead. The problem is that many countries have not been maintaining their rail network over the last 20, 30, 40 years, because we've been relying on cars and fossil fuels and air travel. And so, unfortunately, the alternative sources of travel are not necessarily as reliable, as cheap, and there. And so, those discussions, oh my gosh, we could talk for hours. So let's stop there.
Yeah, I don't know Sweden, but in Brazil, for example, we almost don't have like any trains, right?
Yeah, it's pretty small.
It's a lot of flying, but yeah.
And it's such a big country.
It is.
Yeah.
I think it's the 5th.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but something like that. It's one of the biggest. So in our next question, talking about all these breaking like barriers, the lens of lifestyle mobility are capable of blurring the concepts of tourism and migration, right, into forms of corporeal mobilities that involve multiple homes and belongings. So it's a fluid process. So how would you describe this lifestyle mobility for someone who has never read about this topic?
I think in the current climate, I think we would just talk about things like digital nomads, because there's so much in the news that it's an immediate picture for people to go, oh yeah, okay, yeah. And so that might help. And I think I would use examples to talk about it. So I would use things like digital nomads, where people are moving from place to place where they can work and live, but the choice of where they go is more about a lifestyle choice than a work-based approach. They're not moving for work, they're moving because they want to be in Barcelona this weekend, Bangkok next month, and they can work from those places because their job or their lifestyle allows them to. And then the other one is the sort of the obvious one, and that is the sort of the tourism or the resort worker, where you have, for instance, the ski instructor who is a ski instructor in the winter and then is a windsurfing instructor in the summer and moves back and forth, or even grooming, sort of the mountain the groomers that groom the slopes, how actually they don't go from summer to winter, they go from winter to winter. So they might work in Australia and New Zealand, and then they move to the Northern Hemisphere, to Europe, or to the US or Canada. And again, they're constantly mobile, and that is the chosen lifestyle, where they get to live their lifestyle, but then also do a job that appeals to them. So those are sort of the examples that I would probably use to then try and talk about this idea of mobility that is about lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that was awesome, because our next question was, can you give us some examples of that gray zone that plays in between the migration and tourism? And I think you explained a lot. If you want to talk a little more.
Yeah, and I think I wonder whether that gray zone is sort of expanding a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think digital nomads are a great example, partly because governments and individuals have realized it. So, governments are offering visas to encourage this type of mobility, and they have been sort of during COVID and post-COVID to bring people in. And so it's showing that this sort of lifestyle mobility is becoming much more normalized, because governments are going, oh, look, we can attract these people who actually are bringing in a decent amount of money and staying longer term. They're not just staying for a day or two, and then encouraging other people. And it's sort of this circular route. And yet at the same time, we don't have to give them permanent work visas, and we don't have to give them all of these the some of the downsides of it. So I think that's a really good example. Although I think more and more when we talk about migration and tourism, there are more blurrings, because we have and then you go, so well, educational tourism, people moving to study and then staying, it's a form of lifestyle mobility, although they probably move for what we would call educational tourism in the first instance, but often people will stay in the place they go to for various reasons, because they like where they are, because they have made new friends, or met a partner, or have found a job, and so all of those different reasons then mean that they stay. So I think that sort of, and these are all talking about very privileged ideas of lifestyle mobility. I think we can discuss how it works at all sorts of different levels.
Okay.
I thought I wasn't going to have anything to say, and I'm just talking at you. I'm sorry.
I told her, like, teachers, we always want to talk. we always know what to say. So yeah, it's been really good. I just have a quick question about the digital nomads. Is Sweden like a place where they have a lot of, I don't know how to say this properly, like points for those people to meet, or do you know about that?
No, I actually, so I was at the International Geography Union conference in Dublin last week, and there was a presentation for some people from the south of Sweden they're sort of across the bridge from Copenhagen. And so they'd sort of been talking to people and heard rumors that there were, loads of digital nomads. But actually, it seems that, I'm sure there are some in Stockholm, but actually it seems that actually they might be, say, in Stockholm and Copenhagen, but they're actually not actually moving that much around Sweden. And I think partly it has to do with the attractiveness of the destinations. Barcelona or Bangkok and other places, or the Maldives, the romantic ideas of those are attractive. Whereas, Stockholm in the middle of winter when it's cold and rainy, doesn't necessarily appeal in the same way.
Okay. Have you ever been here in Brazil?
No, I haven't, and I would love to come.
Okay, put it on your bucket list. That's a must. Because we now are in São Paulo, where University of São Paulo is, but I'm from Rio de Janeiro. And in Rio, there are some famous cities, not famous cities, but the famous locations like Ipanema or Copacabana, that they have some points for these people to work. But I don't know much longer than. Do you know here in São Paulo?
I'm not originally from São Paulo. I'm from a city in the countryside.
Yeah.
But I've been living here for 3 years now, and I never heard of those points too. As well.
It's something really niche.
Yeah,
they are the ones who know.
Maybe
about
I'm just
it.
not in the social circles of the people.
It's okay. So our next question. So talking about this work and tourism now, many researchers use the example of resorts to point out the complexity of those mobilities. But what if we switch our attention to airplanes, for example? Because it's work, but it's also an opportunity to for leisure somewhere else. So do you believe that is an increasing kind of mobility nowadays?
Yeah, and I like the example of an airplane. So I was thinking it's not just about the passengers, some of whom are traveling for leisure and some of whom are traveling for work or pleasure, or whatever we might want to call it, the business leisure crossover. But I was also thinking about the fact that there are people working on the plane, and often one of their maybe initial reasons to become employed by an airline is for tourism reasons, because they think that they will then be able to travel. They work and then they end up in a destination and have the tourism experiences. So it did make me think about how we think about work and leisure, and the fact that actually work, leisure, and mobility, and working while we're mobile and leisure while we're mobile are occurring more and more. It also made me think about the example of container ships who take passengers. So there's a good number of container ships who go around the world and take passengers, and people are doing that instead of going on cruise ships because they want a more authentic experience. And I thought that's actually almost a better example of the tensions between migration and tourism and leisure, because you have often migrant communities on those boats working in very dangerous conditions to help support, for instance, families at home. And yet what you have is a few tourists wandering around, you know, paying paying a decent amount of money and getting treated like they were on a cruise ship, but they are on a working container ship. And so I was thinking that that's also quite a good example of the tensions between work, migration, and tourism. So thank you. You made me think. You made me really think about it. I really like thinking about it.
That's good. That's good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, our next question, and considering all of this moving around, not coming back to origin and not permanently staying, what do we do with the word home? Because since home is where the heart is, between quotations.
I think it's another really thoughtful question, because home is still definitely place-based for many people. If you look at many countries, and I'm going to use the UK as the example because it's the one where I know the main figure, but something like 80% of the people in the UK still live within 75 miles of where they grew up. So if we think about it like that, then actually not that many people are that mobile because they actually haven't gone far from home. But I think home does have some place attachment, but I think actually it's as much about emotional affect. It's about the people. It's about who we consider to be our home, our anchor, whether that's parents or family or friends or, you know, someone. It's also, I think, a bit about history. So if you look around the world at how people relate to their past, then home can often be related to history, both recent history, but also, you know, longer history. And so homes can be in various places. I also think that it's very rare for us to have one home these days. I think we often have more than one home. We have homes. You know, home is where our parents are, but it's also where our best friend live. It's also where we're studying, you know, it's all those different things. So we often have multiple homes and we're anchored in multiple places. But I was thinking, because in the 90s, there was Alison Blunt and someone else came up with a book just called Home. And I was thinking it would almost be a good one to go back and sort of research and to see how this conception of home has shifted over time.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's funny because that's really how we are living right now. We basically have two homes
I was
because
thinking about that.
we live in São Paulo because of the university, but I have my house in Rio where my mother and my dog is, and that's really important to me. I have
this is important stuff.
once in a while I go back there to check how they are doing and like take some time with them and feel home again. And
yeah, like I'm going to my home city today. Like after work, I'm going back. But like, yeah, that's such a reality, actually.
yeah, because Hoji is like 2 hours from here, right, for you?
Yeah, it's around 2 hours, like 1.5 by train, and more like 30 minutes on the bus.
Okay.
Then I get home.
Because for me, it's like 6 to 7 hours on a bus. It's a little farther, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers here. And now we had some questions that we took from the article itself, because that was like 10 years ago, basically. So we were wondering if we could maybe answer or try to answer them right now. So the first one is, how will these forms of lifestyle mobility change and react as the world begin to deal with shortages in fuel?
I think that's interesting, you know, as the advancement of electric cars and biofuels, you know, is that actually going to change how we travel? It is in a way, because people have to stop more often. So think about cars and the fact that you have to stop to recharge. And so that's going to change the way we are mobile, because we have stopping points. So that's going to be quite interesting. I also think it's sort of, if we look at sort of 2022, 23, 24 post-COVID, then how we moved, we all forgot there was going to be a shortage of fuel because we just wanted to get out and move. And now again, we're starting to think about, we need to think about the climate. We need to think about the future. I think some of the problems is that we're so busy worrying about climate and peak oil, which was what John Urry came up with later in his career. But we're not necessarily looking at, for instance, the batteries in electric cars, which are using rare minerals and are actually depleting the earth of other resources. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about where some of the future technologies might come from to make sure that we're not just shifting the problem. Because I think there are some really good solutions, but let's not hide the problems. I think VR and AR and are going to come in, and we are going to see less travel and more virtual travel. There's beginnings of ideas about augmented reality where you can think of ABBA's Voyager show, where they are avatars basically on stage and people go and watch their avatars. Well, if you can do a presentation, like if we could do this where you came and were sitting with me as your avatars, or I came to you, we don't need to travel. I mean, yes, we can do it like this, but we don't need to travel if you can actually have an avatar, yourself in that room. So I think some of those technologies will help us. I don't think they will ever fully get rid of travel. I think human nature means we want to go and travel and explore and seek and meet other people face to face.
Yeah, that's awesome. Next question is, will types of sustainable lifestyle mobility surface to allow those global transnational people to continue their ways of life and so their lifestyles?
I hope so, I think, is my simple answer. But I don't know how. I mean, do we think of like digital nomads as a sustainable way of doing it? But we can already see problems with them about where do they pay tax, for instance? If they're working, where are they contributing to? Are they contributing to the place that they're staying? Are they contributing to a home country? Or yeah, I think some of it depends on what and this comes back to your earlier question about equality and equity in lifestyle mobility or mobility. And how do we make it sustainable, but how do we also make it more open so that everybody has, or more people, not everybody, but more people might have the opportunity to be mobile at a time where we're also suggesting we should be less mobile.
Awesome.
I feel like the answer resides in the kind of energy that we are using, as we kind of talked about here a little bit. But it's just difficult to implement those new kinds of energy, like how to change everything that we already have that use like those kind of gases. Yeah, so those are some stuff that we can research about, right?
Exactly, totally. And your work, even thinking about sort of vegan tourism, I think is really interesting, because vegan tourism, being vegan is a philosophy. It's a way of life, not just a fashionable fad of not eating meat. So if we take it as its philosophy, what does that mean for how we travel, how we treat the world, and where that might lead us in terms of our mobility?
Yeah, because while I was doing this kind of research, I could realize that most people thought that vegan tourism or veganism in general would be only, oh, you don't eat meat. And I would say, no, when a person is vegan, there's like a bunch of stuff that we have to worry about. Yeah. So that was my big task in the academic community.
Okay, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was great to research about it.
Yeah.
So now we have kind of our last question. So are lifestyle mobility more accessible to wider populations and contribute further to the reconfiguring of place attachment?
I think yes, but I also think this comes back to the complexity in that I think when we first came up or wrote this article, we were thinking quite simplistically about lifestyle mobilities, whereas I think because I think people move for much more reasons, which lifestyle is only one reason. So instead of being simple of, oh, we're moving for lifestyle, now it's we're moving for work and lifestyle and education and we haven't got opportunities where we are. And so then that means that it's less about accessibility and more about the fact that more people are willing to move or able to move, and lifestyle happens to be one of the reasons why they can move. There's an article that came out last week in Mobilities, which I haven't read in detail, and it talks about imaginations and the regimes of immobility and mobility, and how people are mobile, either mobile or less mobile, because of how they imagine where they could go and what they could do. So sometimes we imagine ourselves out of a bad situation, and that actually helps us be mobile, or we imagine that we can't move, that we're stuck, you know, and that makes us less mobile. And so I think some of these ideas come into it especially when we talk about then and bring it in with place attachment. Oh my gosh, I'm stuck here, I can't move, I'm never going to get out. If we don't imagine a way out, then we don't begin to explore how we can get out. So I think, yeah, I think there's still a lot to explore to figure out how lifestyle mobilities and mobilities more general can be more accessible, still linked to place, and yet at the same time open up, you know, what place means and how we might be attached to it.
It's funny that you talked about this article. I haven't read it. I didn't know about it, but I really got interested in it. And while you were talking about it, I could realize some family and friends that had that mind, oh, I have to live here. I was born here, I will live here, I will die here. They don't think about going anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't think I need to think about someone else. Like, I think myself, you
No.
know, at some point you like think, oh, I'm never gonna get out of here, you know.
But look at you now.
Yeah, look at me now. I'm 2 hours away from where I was born.
Yeah, but you're.
But then you see, so I moved from England to New Zealand for my first academic job, and people would be like, "Why did you move to New Zealand?" And my answer usually was, "Why not?" And they went, "Oh, never thought," you know, and they went, "I never thought of that." And I was like, because, you know, I sort of said, I need a job. And I sort of went, where in the world could I work? And I sort of listed some places. And, you know, for me, it was a case of, well, why couldn't I go there? Not how could I get there? It was, well, why can't I? And so you know, it made me think about my own mindset, and I sort of go, oh, you know, not everywhere is open, because it's not, and it's not always easy, but that having that mindset means that, you know, I go off and do stupid things like move to New Zealand and then go, oh, I know, let's move back to Sweden now. And, you know, and it, you know, it doesn't occur to me that you can't do that.
I feel like some people, they have this image about some perfect locations. And I believe that England is one of them. So when you get out of there to anywhere else, people will always be like questioning, why did you do it?
Yeah.
So I believe like that's probably the main point. But yeah. Tara, I guess we had all of our. Do you have any other questions for Tara?
No.
You're good?
I'm good.
Thank you for asking some really, really thought-provoking questions. I'm going to be thinking about these questions for days. You really made me think, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
If you want to talk, if you need to talk again, let us know. We're here. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, it would be a pleasure.
So
well,
again,
thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to me.
No, of course. And thank you so much for helping us. It's gonna like add a lot for our knowledge in MobTur, because that's the main purpose, right? To try to disseminate more knowledge about tourism, abilities, and the whole thing. So it was a really great talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, have a good day and a good rest of the week. I've lost track of where we are. It's our first week of teaching, so I'm a bit like, I have no idea what's going on.
Okay, so thank you so much, Tara. You have a great day.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.